All right. Good morning. We are live on the Falcons podcast. It is Wednesday. It is the day after the NFL trade deadline, and the Falcons were quiet. We're going to get into that a little bit, and we'll also kind of take a look at the ceiling for this team. We're at the halfway point, whether you want to go 8.5 or 9. There's 9 games. There's 8 left. There is no halfway point anymore, Nick, since they went to an odd, but we're going to call this the halfway point trade deadline. So we're going to take a look at what's the ceiling for this team and kind of predict the rest of the way. And kind of see how it plays out, and where can the Falcons be? What can they be after being quiet at the trade deadline, and all of that type of stuff. But before we move on, Nick, how are you doing this morning?
Tired, but very thankful to Lion Coffee. I reached out to Patrick on Monday with an SOS saying I'm down to my final bag, and I guess I should be getting some here. Actually, no, it came yesterday. I got 15 bags of Lion Coffee, so not the big ones, the normal size ones. But you know what? Man, that's God bless them. Yeah, they're bigger than that.
I love these samples. Thankful. I can't wait to start digging into these. I want to finish this one, which is on its last beans before I dig into my others. But yeah, it's like we don't even bother brewing anymore. We just sprinkle it on. We put it in like shakers and grinders and just put it on our food. And
I got a drip going
now. Well, before we get into all of that, we go live on Mondays and Wednesdays, and sometimes we go at other times. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to make sure you get the alerts when we go live. Because if there's something going on, like if the Falcons had made a wild trade last night, we would have gone live. We would have done an instant reaction. So make sure you hit that subscribe. We're knocking on the door of 7,000 subscribers on YouTube because of people like you. So thank you very much. But we go live because we like having the conversation with y'all. And folks like Justin, who's in here with that mad Jeep. I love that picture. He says, good morning, everyone. It sucks that we couldn't make a trade. I'd like to say it's up to the DC to get creative, but there's not much confidence there for me. And John is coming in, another car guy out there racing. He's racing Mustangs out there. We got a cool group of fans here, Nick. Cool group of listeners.
Yeah.
He says, I believe it's more of a scheme issue than personnel. So there's a little bit of lack of faith in Jimmy Lake taking and making the most out of what the Atlanta Falcons have. Do you think that's warranted to this point? And then are you surprised the Falcons didn't make a move at the trade deadline?
As far as Lake goes, I feel like Falcons fans are correct in their assessment about not maximizing just based on what we saw last season, right? With Nielsen here, this is a similar depth chart on that side of the ball. If anything, a little bit better with some of the talent, and a lot of your metrics have fallen. Now, granted, we talked about it here, Scott. When your offense is as good as the Falcons is, you're going to get different type of play from opposing teams' offenses versus, it's Desmond Ridder over there. As long as we don't turn the ball over, we're not going to lose. So it's different, like conservative style play, which puts the metrics a little bit different. Can make the metrics a little different. But I do think that's part of it. I'm still more of it's Jimmy's and Joe's kind of thing in the league versus scheme. So there is a cap to it. I mean, how much better can it actually get? Are you going from the 25th best defense to the 10th best defense based on scheme? I don't think so, based on what we've seen here. Maybe you can jump up 5 spots, but overall, I still think it's more of a talent issue. And the second part of your question, am I surprised the Falcons didn't make a move? A little bit, just because of how the roster is shaken up. The NFC South is so up for grabs, and outside of the Lions, it doesn't seem like anybody in the NFC is really a super team. And if you get one shot at them, I mean, you can take them in that situation. But I know the Falcons didn't have a lot of capital to move around. They didn't have a lot of draft picks, so that's kind of makes it hard as well. And based on how they drafted this last cycle, it's a team that's not just win now, but win now and win later. So would I have made the move for Ojulari? I don't know what the cost would have been exactly. If it's costing not a top 100 pick, yeah, I probably would have, just to give that shot in the arm for a team that needs that. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
All right, I want to get back to that stuff. And Greg says, I came here for the baby report. So how's Mills doing? But I stay for the Falcons analysis. Have a great show. Thanks, Greg. I am a big baby. That doesn't change. I always said, like, men, we worry about, like, I got a paper cut. I feel terrible. It's like, oh, my arm broke. Yeah, arm's good. Arm's good. I'm okay here. It's flopping around. I'm okay here. But, I stubbed my toe. Oh, my God, I'm going to die. So it's very, very opposite of how men act. Yes, we can be big babies for sure. Yeah. Unless something's really wrong, and then we got to be tough. Greg. So Nick, how's Mills doing, buddy?
Mills still has a pretty nasty sounding cough. Kind of wakes you up in the night, but luckily he's not coughing and then crying and needing to be settled back down. That was a long week last week with that. But he's in a better mood. He's doing better. He's at daycare again, which thank God for that, because my wife with shingles can't really handle him right now, because you can transfer shingles over to chickenpox if you haven't had chickenpox before. So I've been happy to have a little bit of autonomy at work and sit in my office, not being constantly on the clock there. But he's doing better. Now the one we're watching for is my wife, who's still battling shingles, and that can be painful for a while. So yeah, shingles is no joke, man. It is.
Yeah,
rough.
I got that vaccine and it was awful.
Yeah.
The vaccine was rough. False start Falcon. Good to see you in here. Man, I don't like that. I don't like that name. There's too many false starts. He says, "Good morning, fellas. I had my notification set wrong. I finally caught a live show before it was over." Well, welcome in. I love it when people, because again, we get probably 5x our views or after we go live. So I think it's very cool when people come in after and they're able to join us live and come in and say, hey. So really big fan of that. Like Michael Ronquillo, he's always here. That's why we call him the sunrise and the sunset. That's how much we can count on Michael Ronquillo. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast and all of y'all. I want to get back to the question I asked you, because, I want to answer it too. Am I surprised the Atlanta Falcons didn't make a move? Well, in theory, they did. They just made it in August. They traded a third-round pick for Matt Judon. That was their move. That was the move to address the pass rush. Now they're down to 4 picks in the 2025 draft. They've got their first rounder, they've got their second rounder, they've got a 4th rounder, and they've got a 7th rounder. 4 picks, that's it. Right now, based on their seeding, it would be 22, 56, 123, and 231. So my question on this is, was there anybody out there available? Because yes, the Falcons could use some help. Was there anybody out there available that was worth the cost? Even if it was a 4th round pick, Azeez Ojulari has 8 games left on his contract. He's kind of a system pass rusher. Do you drop him in to this scheme and notice an immediate difference? I guess the way I kind of think of it is, if I switched Arnold Ebiketie and Azeez Ojulari, what do their stats look like? What does Ebiketie have 6 sacks? And people are talking about moving him. Yeah, I think so. I think he would in that system. I don't know that Ojulari is any better than Ebiketie. Judon's been a disappointment, but they did make that move. It just hasn't worked. So based on what was available, based on what the Falcons had to trade, I'm not surprised that they didn't end up making a move. Now, would I trade 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett and Max Crosby? Yes, I would. You'll notice they didn't move either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just such a believer. Obviously, Scott, both of us are very propaganda-based when it comes to defensive line and pass rush. And let's say you get another Ebiketie. If it cost you a 5th-round pick or even a chance that he could do better than Ebiketie, I might take that swing. All the same, because sending waves of guys and having not that drop off there where you can rotate in the heaviest rotational position in all of sports, or all of football at least, I would be interested in that. But again, given the lack of capital that the Falcons have right now after the moves they've already made and how they approach this last draft, getting almost no contributions from their current class. They value the future direction based on those draft picks, based on what they've shown to date over the last cycle. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, Keith brings up another good point. Zadarius Smith, he would have been intriguing to me as well. Baron Browning for a 6th, that would have intrigued me. All those moves for the Falcons, just to bring in a little bit more options and juice, because it's not just adding to what you have right now, it's adding insurance to what you have right now. Because as bad as the Falcons pass rush has been as well, you are one injury away from being pretty darn concerning to completely anemic there. And obviously you don't want to totally build a team based on those kind of parameters, but you do want to protect yourself if you're in a run like this. So again, I understand why they didn't. I probably would have made a low cost move just to fortify the room a little bit and give you a little insurance in the least.
Yeah, and again, I still go back to it a little bit. What John said at the top. I think part of this is scheme, and I see this question from Shannon Davis. I'm going to hit this on Shannon too because this is kind of the same thing. So I have a question. The media likes to say that players will want to come to Atlanta and play for Coach Raheem Morris. We will attract free agents, but what defensive player will want to play in this system? Your thoughts? I can't say. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we've got a small sample size on this. What this system is this it, or is this how they're playing now based on the opponents they faced, which has been a 6-3 start? Okay, that's good. I just don't lose it. It's kind of what you're asking your defense right now. Just don't lose the game. It's frustrating to watch. But when you're going against the Carolina Panthers, when you're going against a banged up Tampa Bay Buccaneers team who was depleted, injury depleted, big time. When you're going against Justin Fields making his first start, when you're going against Dak Prescott and they're all beat up too and lack of weapons and all these type of things, can I get away with, hey, I'm going to be ultra conservative because I don't think you guys can string together 12-play drives? Yes, it has worked. So while it's frustrating to me, I also am willing to acknowledge that this isn't how it has to be. It doesn't have to be this way. A simple change we talk about, Nick, we're one injury away from really bad on the defensive line. Okay, well, let's say you bench Matt Judon and you just play Ebiketie in a stand-up role and you bring in 3 defensive linemen again. You're really deep there. One injury there, I sit Grady Jarrett. I still have 3 defensive linemen. Last year and sometimes this year, you'll see a 4-man front, but it's 3 defensive line and a stand-up edge. That's how they started the season. They went away from it and went to 2 defensive linemen and 2 stand-up edges, which I don't particularly agree with on the whole. Now, game to game, again, it's been successful because you don't have good enough edges to play 2 edges and 2 defensive linemen, and you're much deeper on the defensive line. Part of that could be injuries too, Nick. Let's see what happens if they can ever get Bertrand, Ellis, and Anderson healthy at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Ellis's impact and pass rush and attacking role in that Dallas game gives you some hope that you can kind of manufacture pressure despite the lack of edge talent in the defense overall. But still, I think it does make you pretty capped because, I mean, just basic defense, you do need to be able to run a set of nickel sub package with 2 interior guys and 2 edge guys, especially if teams are going to approach you with 11 personnel, 10 personnel, and throw the football around. You need to have a little bit of juice there, in my opinion. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, the Falcons defense right now is obviously the Achilles heel on the team. They're ranked
Don't say Achilles. Just say weakness. We can say weakness. I don't want to hear about Achilles on this team.
Yeah, absolutely. In area of weakness on the roster, but they're ranked 22nd in EPA per play. I don't have the DVOA in front of me, but I can't imagine that's very good either because the schedule so far for the Falcons and the Broncos with the beating up the NFC South isn't lending itself to amplifying based on strength of schedule. But you got the last half of the season. It's still a new scheme being implemented overall, new rosters, a lot of new pieces. So there is still upside that the guys on the roster can continue to grow and get better. A big thing is, I mean, it's so true, but especially feels true this season. Stay healthy, relatively healthy, because guys are dropping left and right. This year, it feels like if you can avoid those big injuries, that can be big, obviously, down the stretch.
Nando, he says 12-5. We're winning it all this season. I like the I don't even know the word for it. Optimism. Is that the word? I use it so infrequently. I forgot what the word is. Optimism. Michael, good to see you. Carrie, thanks for checking in. She says, good morning, everyone. Disappointed we didn't get a deal done yesterday, but can't dwell on it. Got to figure out ways to improve with the guys we have now. Let's sweep the Aints this Sunday. Thanks for stopping in, Carrie. And yeah, I get it, but I wasn't all about Ojulari. If he was the guy, I really wasn't. I wasn't like, okay, I want to give up a 4th-round pick, and I don't know if the Giants would have taken a 4th-round pick, but that's basically what you had to offer, a 4th and a 2026 pick for a guy who's had some moments, but has he been consistent enough to say, yeah, I want this guy? Basically, Zach Harrison had the same type of production the last 3 games of last year, and we haven't seen hide nor hair of him. I wasn't sold on Ojulari being the fix, being the guy. And there aren't many of those guys available, y'all. And they're expensive if you want to try and get them at midseason. So would you have kicked the tires on, trade that 7th for Baron Browning? Maybe that's about as high as I would have gone. But the Cardinals went 6th round for him. So they upped that, and you don't have a 6th rounder. Is that what I said? Yeah. They go 1, 2, 4, 7. You didn't have a 6th rounder to try and get Baron Browning from the Denver Broncos. I just don't know that they were available. But moving on to the Saints, like Kerry says, they made the news this week. They fired their coach, and then they became sellers at the trade deadline. So Dennis Allen was out. That happened immediately after we went off our live show on Monday. And then they sent Marcus Lattimore. They don't have a lot of trade pieces. It's like, the Saints are in free fall. Try and go get their players. You can't trade for a lot of their players because they all have massive backloaded contracts, because that's how they're able to get under the salary cap whenever they want to. And when those guys stop performing and you're 2-7, you are screwed. That's where the Saints are right now.
Luckily for a lot
how's
of
the same look coming in, Nick?
Yeah, luckily, we'll see what happens to the Saints. They're going to be very interesting this offseason, but they did set a lot of, I think the word is poison pill contracts, where there is void seasons afterwards. So you could trade for guys, and a lot of those dead cap hits after the contract expired are going to stick with the Saints for a bit. So the Saints are in a really bad spot
That's what I mean. They can't trade many guys because they can't afford to, because the dead cap they would have to absorb now. It's like, we can move. Who is one of the pop? Taysom Hill. Let's trade for Taysom Hill. He's got a $30 million dead cap. They can't afford to absorb $30 million dead cap.
I think if I was in charge of the Saints and, king of the world and that whatever, I would totally blow that team up and take your Wheaties for a couple seasons. I mean, I also think narrative wise, if they are so terrible next season, there goes the camera, of course. But if they're so terrible next season, that means that they could possibly get Arch Manning as well. So that would be very interesting.
Yeah, I would. I agree. I'd be like, okay, let's just take on a record dead cap hit and start over. Yeah. They need a reset. They've been kicking the can down the road, putting their players on their credit cards. Now they're old. Now, Cam Jordan's not even playing, and I bet he's got a $40 million dead cap number. Jordan, spot rack, let me check. Cam Jordan is hardly playing this year. He is 35 years old, and his dead cap number right now, if you tried to move on from him, is $38 million. It's $38 million for a guy that's not playing. People that say the salary cap doesn't matter, Falcons fans, you know better. Laugh at them. Haha, the salary cap doesn't matter. We sat there with $95 million in dead cap last year. What do you mean it doesn't matter? It's 23 next year, and then the void years kick in where it's 14 for void years, where he's got a $14 million cap hit when he's not even on the team anymore. Like, at all, period. He can't be on the team. Not that he was just traded or cut. He doesn't have a contract with anybody. So the Saints can't just make moves and dump salary. They couldn't do that because they couldn't afford to take on the dead cap hit. Next year, I agree with you. Let's just pick 5 guys that aren't productive with $30 million dead caps, and we're going to take on $150 million in dead cap, and we're going to reset for 2026. I agree with you. But for right now, do you worry at all about the new coach bump? You see it in soccer mainly. You see it some in football. Are these Saints going to come out inspired? Are they going to come out ready to fight, ready to prove themselves with their new coach? It was all Dennis Allen, and we're ready to go. Or are these guys stick a fork in them? They're done for the season.
I think it's stick a fork. They're done for the season. I mean, they have their players taken to the game immediately afterward, talking about like maybe they should put me at quarterback. There's got to be some weird locker room stuff also with Derek Carr coming back and absolutely getting Chris Olave obliterated with another concussion. It seems like it's completely spiraling.
And I haven't seen the fines haven't come out yet, but Brian Branch got, and I really can't believe why everybody was up in arms why he got ejected. Probably because similar hits happen and they don't get ejected. But top of the helmet, leading like this with no arms. I'm the no armed man going in and hitting with the top of my helmet to somebody in the ear hole. They get thrown out. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, gone.
This one, I don't know if y'all saw the Olave. I watched the game last night. Olave had a guy on his back. Carr throws him onto a slant into dead man zone, where you couldn't make those throws 10 years ago because this is what happens. Those hits were illegal. Has a guy on his back, and then the safety comes in and hits him high, and he's coming on. I think that was his first game back from the previous concussion, where the Tampa Bay guy could have been thrown out. And I just felt awful for him. I mean, just it was awful. It was just an awful play.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about a lot of wide receivers coming out of the draft, but you look around the league, everybody's kind of hunting for playmakers, and Olave has been one of the best young ones in football when he's been out there. So I know his brother's on Twitter talking about like maybe him stopping playing, like maybe that's it. I think that might be his 4th or 5th concussion in his career already, and 2 in succession. I mean, I'd imagine he's done for the year, if not forever. So we'll see. But yeah, it's a Saints team that is an absolute free-for-all. Doesn't seem like they are one that's going to circle the wagons and rally. There's a lot of vitriol and disappointment based on the vibes from the players on Twitter and everything.
So give me a line. You probably haven't looked at it. Looking at ESPN's Gamecast, what do you think the line on this game is right now?
I would go Falcons 11.5.
It's 3.5. And the Gamecast percentage is what?
I would go 70% Falcons.
It's like 51.5%.
I don't understand at all.
I'm like, I was thinking 60-40 maybe, 6.5 point favorites or so, so it's that one surprised me a little bit. And we know it's a Saints. We know those games play close, but this Saints team it's not really a Saints team. It's a collection of guys that are just playing it out right now. So we'll see on that. Derek Carr still has a good arm, but he's putting the ball in harm's way. I'll be shocked. It has nothing to do with Falcons Saints. I don't want to see Olave back. I don't care if he clears concussion protocol. That's 2 in his last 2 games. Take a little more time, kid. Take a little more time. Quinn has a question, and I see a couple other questions I want to hit on here that I really like. Quinn says, hey, Scott, do you think the reason why the D-line haven't got a lot of sacks yet is because the coverage from the secondary being 15 yards back from the receivers? I think, Quinn, a lot of the Falcons' scheme this far has been sideways and backwards. We're going to concede the run. We're going to keep stuff in front of us. We're going to try and hem in the quarterback, which hasn't worked at all. That they haven't really attacked. And part of it, we got the question on Monday, did the Falcons seem like they played faster? The Cowboys were making mistakes on first down and getting themselves in 1st and 15s, 2nd and longs, and the Falcons were able to attack instead of react. And if you're reacting, it's going to cost you a step. You're going to look a step slower than if you are dictating the pace. You can do that when you get in good down and distances. When you're conceding the run like the Falcons have, literally conceded the run, 6 guys in the box, 2 guys 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and a light front, they're looking at 2nd and 4s all day, Nick.
Yeah. At some point, we'll have to do a deep dive into the numbers with the Falcons, just kind of go piece by piece, see what's really standing out there. But yeah, I'm still flabbergasted by the numbers you had there, Scott, for the Saints game. I mean, this is a dreadful Saints team. They just lost to the freaking Panthers. I mean, they're in complete disarray. And
like, wait a minute, was that right? I have to check this. Was Scott right?
Yeah, it's like, how is that possible? Somebody has to be writing like think pieces on this. Like, what is going on? I mean, I understand the Falcons' defense isn't dominant, but they're definitely a good enough team to put away teams that are circling the drain. So that's confusing to me, no doubt.
Yeah, what's not confusing is Rusty coming in and showing the support. Appreciate the super chat, Rusty. Helps keep the lights on, keep my forehead nice and shiny. He says, fellas, good morning. Does Raheem and the squad owe it to Arthur Blank to run the score up on the Saints? Dennis Allen's gone, but we haven't forgot. Did they run up the score last year? I don't remember. At that point, I know it was a big score last year, and it was the thing that sticks in my mind was Arthur Smith is fired. That's all I really remember from that game was, okay, Arthur Smith. If there was any doubt about does this happen or not, it's gone. There's no doubt. And frankly, Arthur Smith should have been fired, and he might have been, honestly. He might have already been fired. Coming back from Phoenix before the bye week is when he was gone. They didn't do it, but he was gone.
Yeah.
He was gone right there.
I do have an interesting metric. Thank you, Rusty, so much for the support. We really do appreciate you. Just kind of digging through some of the numbers here. If anything really stands out, it's got a weird area for Falcons. So if you guys are in here, you're football nerds. Just accept it. It's fine. A weird area of this game to watch. This is the best versus the worst in the NFL in a key metric on both sides of the football. Average starting field position. The Saints have the best starting field position for their offense and defense. Shout out to their special teams. It's actually been pretty good this season, where the Falcons are literally not the worst in defensive starting field position at 29th, but worst in offensive starting field position in 32nd. So talk about the small margins in
They're
a game.
still putting up 30 points a game.
Yeah, the offense is even better than we think because of the average starting field position is the worst in the NFL for the Falcons. So how does that happen? You're not getting turnovers. You're not getting good returns, and you're not defense isn't really causing a lot of 3-and-outs. So those are areas to keep an eye on, but pretty shocking to see just the massive discrepancy in that specific statistic.
Yeah, people were reminded that Jameis Winston went in and scored quickly. I do remember the hubbub about that afterwards, and frankly, I was more concerned with my own house at that point than the Saints. It's like, listen, let the Saints have their fun. Who cares? We are an embarrassment here in Atlanta. They didn't embarrass us. We embarrassed ourselves. That was my bigger concern with that team last year. Mitch comes in. He says, I feel we need to give Zach Harrison more edge reps. Mitch, I will agree and disagree with you, and it's semantics on this. Zach Harrison's not an edge. He's a defensive end. And those are different because right now they're playing two stand-up edges, lighter guys, 250, 255, 65 pounds. Zach Harrison's not quick enough to play that role, but as a defensive end, when we see the three-man front with a one stand-up edge where you go three guys that are 280 to 300 pounds, Zach Harrison, Taquan Graham, David Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, Ruka Rohoro was starting to fit into that. When you have three of those guys with one stand-up, it's a pretty good defensive line. I would agree with you. I would like to see more Zach Harrison, just not necessarily as you claim as an edge, but more as a three-man front, three-man DL front. Instead of this 2-4-5 nickel, make it a 3-4, not 3-4, 3-3-4 nickel. And then you're just, instead of having two light guys in the box. And the thing is, Nick, I mentioned it's either backwards or sideways. The splits when they do that are so huge. You've got both of your edges lined up way outside of the tackles, and then you've got basically your tackles, Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, lined up on the outside shoulders of the guards. I mean, there's just acres of space in there. So, Mitch, on this, I agree with you. I would like to see more of the three-man fronts, and Zach Harrison was really coming into his own like that as a defensive end last year.
Yeah. He was pretty good there last season, and he's kind of a hybrid inside-outside guy, so maybe in some base package stuff, get him out there. But they're going to have to figure some things out. Luckily for the Falcons, the schedule isn't, and the division isn't really harrowing. I mean, what did we talk about last week? I think the Falcons, NFL.com has their playoff probability at 84%. So granted, at this point, the goal shouldn't just be playoffs in NFC South. It should be trying to make some noise in the playoffs. But yeah, it's going to come down to the defense, unless I do think that the offense is good enough to play keep up with just about anybody. But the defense needs to take a step forward and really, I mean, again, we talk about it with personnel. It's not a good defense. It's not all of a sudden going to become a good defense. They need to figure out a way to start making more turnovers. And I know there's a little bit of volatility to that, but that's the way they dig themselves out. There's been teams that have gone on runs that have had poor defensive personnels. You know, they're not getting the 3 and outs. They're giving up a lot of yards per play, but they figure out how to manufacture turnovers. So can they do that? How does that get done? I'm not exactly sure. That's why I'm not a defensive coordinator, right, for them. But I think that's the key to success in circumventing the lack of talent that the defense currently has.
Going back to Ojulari Rio, appreciate the stars coming in and the support. He says, good morning, Falcon family. Sorry I'm late, but if this wasn't said already, apparently a deal was in place for Ojulari, but the Giants didn't submit the trade in time. We have to play the buyout game now. So I've heard that, and I also saw the Garofalo at about 3:15, 45 minutes before the deadline, has said the Giants are keeping Ojulari. This is done. They're not moving him. So did they change their minds in the last 45 minutes? I don't think that Garofalo would run with that and then have a deal being made later. And there was still plenty of time to get a deal done. So mixed signals on this one. And that's part of the whole deal. I mean, there's so much lying that goes on in this. It's not quite politics, but it's close. They call, GM speak, coach speak. You know what those are synonyms for? Lying, bluffing. It's poker games. What is bluff? It's a lie. Trying to convince you something that's not true. So I wouldn't take this as fact. Either way, I absolutely believe the Falcons were in the market. They tried. They didn't find the guy they wanted to at the price they wanted to, obviously. And that's okay. Again, what did the Falcons do? The Falcons made their deal in August for Matt Judon, and it cost them a 3rd-round pick. That was their trade. That was their draft pick for trading to upgrade their pass rush. Just to this point, it hasn't worked out, unfortunately.
No. You need waves. It's an area the roster takes a bit to go, and luckily there'll be options on the in the upcoming draft as well. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be fixed overnight. You got to just kind of deal with what you have. I mean, there's a chance that Ebiketie still takes a step forward, I guess, right? Maybe somebody else as well, but yeah, again, they got to figure out how to manufacture more turnovers and get a little bit more creative with your pressure. Because right now, I mean, I think you got a chance against a lot of teams in the NFC. I'm not sure. I mean, Scott, the pecking order right now in the NFC, I think the Falcons would be especially if Vegas is saying a 3-point game against the Saints. What is that? That shocks me. But I mean, the Eagles are starting to play really well. Since week 3, they're top 10 in
defense. Don't know what they're going to be in January.
It's hard to say, but I think they figured out the difference is AJ Brown out there. When he's out there, it completely changes them, but they have a dynamic running game and their defense, Scott, that's the big difference. They were bottom 10 the first 3 weeks, and I think they're top 10 since. Adding Cooper DeJean to their slot has changed what they do a lot. They're really playing good football. Commanders bring in Marshawn Lattimore. You have the 49ers are still like one of the top, I think, 6 teams in Super Bowl odds and point differential, and they get Christian McCaffrey back now. The Cardinals are interesting. I mean, Kyler Murray is a really talented quarterback, 2nd year in the system there. And then, of course, you have Packers and Lions, who I'm going to fade the Vikings a little bit. I can't buy Sam Darnold. He puts the ball in harm's way too much.
I've been saying that since week 4.
Yeah.
Well, I've been saying that since he was drafted, but that's neither here nor there. He's playing well. He is, but
yeah,
I just don't think you win a championship with Sam Darnold. People say the same thing about Kirk Cousins. That's fine. Not a whole lot of people are talking about the Falcons winning championships this year. Yeah. Real quick on this, wanted to, again, say thanks to Lion Coffee for powering us up. Make sure that you are, because this podcast is powered by Lion Coffee. Make sure you check out lioncoffee.com. And remember, in the description, there's a link to Lion Coffee, and there's also our code that will get you 20% off anything that you order there except full cases or 100% Kona beans. And you get 20% off with the Falcons, with our code, with the Falcons podcast code, Go Falcons 20% off. So thank you there. Richard Weaver talking about, we also get Braylon Trice back next year. And again, yes, but 3rd-round pick, will it help? It should. Is this the answer? Odds say no. The odds are, yeah, well, what about? We can play whataboutism all you want to. I know there's exceptions to the rule. The rule is 3rd-round edges are hard to hit. Third round edges coming off ACL, season-ending ACL injuries are really hard to hit. I had low expectations for Braylon Trice this year. I've got zero expectations for Braylon Trice in 2025. Whatever you get out of him is gravy. It is gravy. Third round pick coming off a season-ending knee injury. No, that's not the savior coming in. If he is, great.
Yeah.
But that's not how I'm building my team.
Yeah, at this point, it would be a nice surprise, right? If he was a major impact player, but we talked about him in all offseason, right? Even the odds of him being a dynamic superstar pass rusher or even a starting caliber pass rusher, third round pick, you're probably talking a little less than probably a 40-60 shot there, Scott. And now with the injury and everything, especially with the testing, I mean, there's a reason he fell. It was not a great tester. So, yeah, and that matters for edge, not for every position. Obviously, games are in the field, not the underwear Olympics, but for the defensive line, it does tend to correlate to success on the field more than other positions. But we'll definitely see with him. I just think you cannot go into the season with the roster being like, okay, we're depending on Trice as being one of our top three. No, let him surprise you in a positive way versus disappoint you.
Dave says, good morning, guys. Thank goodness there was no trade. There is something called the draft, which is where teams are built to last. And the Falcons are short on picks anyway. Mm-hmm. And part of the deal breaker, so to speak, of not going after an Azeez Ojulari is he's a free agent after this year. Maybe they would have been willing to ship a 4th round pick if they had assurances that he would have signed a contract extension when he got here. Or maybe they just didn't think he was worth a contract extension and we're not going after a rental that we're not positive would help this team. I mean, he'd help, yes, but is the juice worth the squeeze on this one? I'm not positive it is based on he's a free agent this year. That said, talking about building the team, the kid's 24 years old. He's younger than at least one of your draft picks. So I kind of looked at that as a building block. If you could keep him, if you wanted to keep him, then I was okay on that edge that he is someone that you were trying to get to keep if you were going after Ojulari because he was 24 years old.
Yeah, I agree. I understand not giving up the draft picks. We only have 4, and it's a team that's going to need some draft picks with getting out from some of the aging guys on this team. So we'll see. Again, they held firm. Whatever was out there wasn't worth it to them in the end. And you're going to have 4 draft picks. Hopefully free agency can bring in somebody else. I feel for you, Scott. I know that you are also a defensive line minded person, and be as anemic in the pass rush department has to be a personal tragedy for you.
Well, it's frustrating because I know that there's personnel there on the defensive line to really let's buck up and stop the run and take a little bit more chances on the back end because we've got the best safety duo in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So let's load the box a little more. And again, 6-3. Remember that. You're winning games. And Richard, thank you for the stars coming in. You're winning games. That's what's most important here. So can you make the adjustments in games where I can't count on the offense to implode? If I see a 2-4-5 in the first round of the playoffs against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, and they're running circles around you, and it's 2nd and 1 the whole game, and you're not trying to stop the run at all, then I'll have a problem. Then I'll say, okay, it's time to make a change with Jimmy Lake. Right now, I'm saying Jimmy Lake needs to adjust. Let's see if he can. Because we don't know. We don't know. They really haven't had to for the most part. Again, the schedule that you've seen has allowed you to play soft. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a big bad word, but it's been working for this team. Now, before we get out of here, let's say there's 8 games left, and you're going to go on the road a lot. You've had a lot of home games. It's been but your toughest slate of games, in theory, is I won't say things have changed. Never mind. Forget everything we said in the summer. Things have changed. The back end of the schedule is harder now than it looked in July. At Saints, Nick, what do you think?
It's got to be a win. Screw the 3-point deficit. If you don't beat them by 10, it's a disappointment. I know there's no such thing as a win is a win is a win in the NFL, but like the team is circling the drain. I don't understand.
All right, 7-3. Then we've got a 3-game stretch, because I'm going to put this in tiers rather than say win, 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 or loss, win, loss, whatever. 3-game stretch at Broncos, Chargers, at Vikings.
I mean, I think you're hoping to go split those at least, right? That's probably where my gut would be. Scott, the whole what Vegas said about the Saints Falcons games has me completely re-questioning where I think this Falcons
blown Nick's mind.
I know. Well, how? I think, okay, 500, maybe +1 on that. Was that even games there? You should be hovering right around 500 with what the defense is, unless the offense goes completely nuclear, which is possible. I think that is possible for this unit.
I think you're talking in that 3-game stretch. I think you're hoping to go 2-1.
Yeah.
2-1. You want to win the home game against the Chargers and split the road games with the Vikings. So that puts 7. That's 9-4. 9-4 with 4 games left.
That's a
At
tough.
worst, you're talking 8-5.
That's a tough stretch. I think you are okay if you go 1-2 in that stretch all the same. I do believe that. I mean, Denver at home, coming off of Ravens and Chiefs, they might be a pretty desperate team there, especially because they would be home for the first time in a bit. The Chargers have right now the number 1 defense in the NFL. Scott, this is crazy, actually. These are the top 3 defenses in the entire NFL, according to EPA per play. We're going to find out about this Falcons offense. Broncos are number 3, Chargers are number 1, and Vikings are number 2 in terms of EPA per play. So that's kind of weird to look at them in that context. I don't think going 1-2 there is a.
I haven't watched the Chargers as much, but I know 2 of those are blitz-heavy teams, and Kirk's been pretty damn good against the blitz.
Yeah, it's we'll see what it looks like. I mean, I think the Broncos defense is very good, but not elite. But the Chargers have been really sound as well. I mean, Jesse Minter is on his way to head coaching interviews this cycle. They've been a big enough revelation. So revelation. So we got Rio coming in saying, should we get Anderson back? Caden Ellis becomes a lot more effective as a rusher as well. You'd hope so. That's part of the plan. I mean, even without Anderson back, with what we saw from Ellis in blips, that should be utilizing him more often, trying to figure out ways to unlock him and get him one-on-ones.
And that's where, if they are insistent on coming out in a base nickel, which in this day and age, it's a passing league, is okay with me. I don't want to see 2, 4, 5 anymore. 2 defensive linemen, 2 stand-up edges, 2 inside linebackers, 5 defensive backs, 2, 4, 5. That's what we've been seeing. I want to see a 3-3-4. 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers. Let Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis freelance. Let them walk up on the edge. I feel like I'm missing somebody, though. 3-3-4 is only 10 players. So 4-man front. And then you can use Ellis and Anderson as wild cards. And that's how you've used Ellis all year anyway. I think he will have a lot more freedom when Anderson comes back because you trust him to clean up things on the back end. He might miss a gap here and there, but we're not giving up 15-yard runs because Troy Anderson's going to catch him. You know, like that's how they played against New Orleans. It's just weird to me, Nick, Rio, that they didn't IR Anderson. He's been out 4 games already. Oh, he's really getting close. Well, he was day-to-day a month ago. That was kind of strange. We'll get back to the schedule. I want to get Dave's question. He says, guys, do teams draft relative to college conferences any longer? It used to be that teams drafted O linemen relative to conference. I think there's a bias in there. It's just, I'm biased towards Alabama defenders. I see a guy playing. It's like, okay, this is supposed to be a highly rated guy. I see, he played defense for Nick Saban at Alabama. He just went up a notch in my brain before I watch him do anything else. So there are biases involved. But part of this, Dave, is the guys that can play at a first-round level, they're not staying at Buffalo anymore. They're not going to stay at North Dakota State anymore. They're going to transfer up to the bigger teams. So the day one, the first round, second round picks coming out of non-power 4 teams, it's going to be rarer and rarer now in the age of the transfer portal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting. This looks like a pretty poor draft class overall with the NIL stuff. A lot of guys going back. This is the last year, the COVID stuff, and a lot of guys who were could come out early, so we'll see how this one plays out. I think it's going to be good for the game long term in the NFL game, but I also think that your draft classes are going to change a bit with the NIL stuff going on here. So we'll be interested, especially the quarterback play. So hopefully it'll be good for all around, but will be interesting to see how it impacts. Again, this is a draft. It's early, right? But from what I've heard from people who have a lot of connections to scouts in the league, this is a class that's going to only have 12 to 16 first round grades, let alone, blue chip caliber grades. So it looks like a lean year overall in the draft, and especially even like the day 3 stuff. It doesn't sound like there's going to be a lot of talent there. So long gone, Scott, are the what was the 2021 draft class where it was just superstar after superstar in the first round? Doesn't appear it's going to be that way.
That was the draft of like the top 15 guys was either you're getting an impact player or you're quarterback of the future. In theory, you never know what you're going to get, but there, the box of chocolates. But it was, the quarterbacks were high, and then you go, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Pat Surtain, Micah Parsons. Was that Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith? I get those two confused sometimes.
Both of them.
They weren't in the same class though.
Yeah, they were. On my life, because Jalen Waddle went 6 overall to the Dolphins, and then Smith went 11 or 12 to the Eagles, and those
both
are
out of Alabama, right?
Yep, same year.
Yeah, and they're both undersized, skinny dudes.
Yep.
Okay, because in my brain they're the same player. I thought they were opposite year. I thought they were opposite years.
No, same year, and you had Chase in that class as well, and that was a hell of a draft class.
That was a top heavy draft for sure.
Yeah.
Coming out of there, and so it was 2021, and we can redo that one another time. All right, finish the thought here. 8-5. Let's say you drop your 2 road games to the Vikings and the Broncos. You're 8-5. Your last 4 games, you're coming up against at Raiders, Giants at home, at Commanders, Panthers at home to finish the 4 where you're sitting at 8-5.
Yeah, I think you're sitting there. I mean, the only game really that should concern you there is that at Commanders one. But I think down the stretch here, you got a really good chance. I mean, even if you go 500 down the stretch, you should be a good playoff team. There goes the camera as I look at the schedule again. But that's it should be, I mean, you should have everything you need in front of you, Scott. So I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I feel like you should be 3-1 in that stretch.
Yeah.
So you're talking 11-6. 10-7 is almost worst case. 10-7 is 500 basically going the rest
down
of the way.
Yep.
So I think 11-6. We talk about the ceiling of this team, and again, as far as getting to the playoffs, there's only one team that I feel like if they're on, everybody's beatable on any given day. We know this, but there's really, for me, only one NFC superpower right now. Only one. You can make some noise against some of these against everybody else. If you're, especially you get a home game, you go 11-6, you get a home game, maybe 2. And it should be interesting, but who that superpower is.
Yeah. I mean, Detroit's number 1 team in football in DVOA. The Vikings sit at 4 right now. I'm not all in on the Vikings. You have San Francisco at 5 still, which is kind of interesting. A lot of the metrics still really like them. It's because they've lost close ones and their wins have been huge. So San Francisco up there. You have the let me see. You have also Washington Commanders at 7, Green Bay at 8, Philly at 9. So those are your teams right now that look to be slightly above you or there. Granted, we'll see what happens here. It's a lot of fading on the Falcons defense, and I mean must be somewhat special teams fading as well. Where are you at special teams? 23rd ranked according to DVOA. So we'll see if that matters. And this is going to be a microcosm game of that, given the field position battle. The number 1 net field position team in the Saints versus the number 32 net field position team in the Falcons.
Yeah, we'll see. I agree with Terry. It's one of those, unless there's some Saints Falcons voodoo going on in New Orleans, this is a game the Falcons should win. Mm-hmm. And we will see. Some coming in because we should be able to beat the brakes off the Aints because of their situation. And then a couple things I want to address here come in late a little bit. Yayun, apologies if I butchered your name. That's why I've got an easy name like Scott and Nick, because we're boring. Says that we didn't bring in any defenders before the trade deadline is unbelievable. And Tony kind of coming in, echoing that over on Facebook. He says, so I guess Morris and Fontenot are happy with our defense. This isn't the draft. You don't get to just choose. So you have to weigh what's available versus what am I willing to spend and what is good for the long-term well-being of this team in my window. And again, I go back to the top of the show, y'all. Who was available? Zadarius Smith might have been available. What did he end up going for? He ended up going not third. I don't remember how high he went, but Baron Browning for a 6. You don't have a 6th-round pick. You don't have a 5th-round pick. They probably wouldn't have taken a 7th, and I wouldn't have gone any higher than that anyway. Azeez Ojulari is going to be a free agent. And is he really the answer? Is he good enough? Is he an upgrade on Ebiketie? Or if you switch those two guys and put Ebiketie in New York and Ojulari in Atlanta, are we talking about Ebiketie having 10 sacks in the system where they're sacking the quarterback 4 times a game? So I understand pass rushers are hard to acquire. That's why you draft them when you can. And the Falcons haven't spent a 1st-round pick in a while. Who's it been since Tack on addressing the pass rush? And their move to address the pass rush was Matt Judon. If they had their 3rd-round pick, still maybe they go and make a trade. But it was Matt Judon. Now they're going to have to apply more pressure. If they want to get more pressure, they're going to have to play like they want to actually get after the quarterback. And part of that's stopping the run, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens there. I'm looking at the Falcons picks. You guys might have to correct me on this. Looks like you have your 1, 2, 4, 5, and potentially a 7 from the Rams as well. Is that incorrect for 2025?
I got 4. Tankathon says 4. That's where I look. But Terry says there's 5 picks. 2 of them are 7. So there might be a conditional one in there that I don't see on Tankathon that I just don't remember.
What I'm seeing is that you got in the Van Jefferson trade, you traded a 2025 6 to the Rams for Van Jefferson and a 2025 7th round pick. So should have the Rams 7th in theory, along with your 1, 2, 4, and 5. I'm using Pro Sports Transactions, who typically are pretty good about keeping all of those things up to date. Yeah, we also have 2026, the Heineke trade, kind of a pick swap there where you're getting a 6th and sending your 7th to the Falcon or to the Chargers there. But looks like you should have 5 unless something happens with the 7th-round pick that you sent to the Eagles in the Contravious Street trade. But
Ray on here, and then we're going to get out of here. Who would you not want to face in the 1st round of the playoffs? Well, first off, it'd be nice to be in the 1st round of the playoffs. So that's a start. I kind of laugh at the Vikings fans that come into all my comments and are writing about Kirk Cousins like, oh, wait till you get to the playoffs. He's going to choke. I'm like, playoffs? We're going to make the playoffs in Atlanta? Yay! Thanks. You're only tied to him for 2 years. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But playoffs would be nice. Who wouldn't you want to face? You're not facing Detroit. Take them off the table. They're going to get a bye.
Yeah. I think that the team that based on going over the metrics and whatnot, I don't buy them, but everything in the advanced stats is saying this is a team that's a sleeping giant still, and that is the 49ers.
That's who I was going to pick.
Yep. The 49ers.
I think when they're on, they're the best team that's not the Lions. And if they get going and get it going into the playoffs, then they've got it going and they're on. I think the 49ers in the playoffs would probably be the most dangerous non-Detroit Lions team.
Yeah, I think them. I mean, again, the Eagles have just so much talent on the roster. I don't think they're necessarily great coached, and I think Jalen Hurts is prone to WTF games. I mean, all he can pretty much throw is 9 routes and RPOs, but with what they have in the offensive line, the 2 weapons, and I mean, Saquon Barkley hurdling guys backwards, and defense has been, I think, top 10 in a lot of metrics since week 3 or 4. They're talented as well, but the 49ers is the one. If the Cardinals end up winning the division, I don't think they're I would want to be trifling with the 49ers in the first round. I mean, they're still Super Bowl favorites are way up there for them, and their advanced metrics are quite high.
You asked who I wouldn't want to face, and the playoffs haven't started, so technically, Ray, nobody's in the playoffs. Let's just make the assumption, who wouldn't you want to face? If the 49ers get it going and they're in the playoffs, that's who I wouldn't want to face in the first round. And on the flip side of this, AFC, who's in the similar situation in the AFC?
As far as
a dangerous team who got off to a slow start that you don't want to face in the first round.
I guess you'd probably say the Bengals.
That's who I'd say. The
Yeah, the
Cincinnati
Bengals.
Bengals.
I think any good team could probably take care of the Bengals because their defense is horrific. I don't think it's the same as the 49ers because the Bengals have a inherent exposable flaw where I think it's just kind of like the 49ers haven't come full circle yet. Like the advanced metrics again, love the 49ers.
But it's one of those, you're the Commanders or you're the Falcons. We haven't been to the playoffs in a decade. The freaking Niners who sludged their way through the first half, and now they've won 8 straight games to get into the playoffs and are 10-7. Damn it.
Yeah, they also know what they're doing there, right?
Yeah.
Like this is a business trip. We've been here. This is not the pinnacle, which obviously the playoffs, first time for the Falcons, home crowd. I mean, that'd be a hell of a game, but 49ers would be a very scary team to play. Now, Brock Purdy does have a tendency to lose his damn mind and throw a couple WTF footballs. So that could, obviously change the game. Nothing changes games like turnovers, but 49ers would be the ones that scare me.
One last one before we get out of here. Mitch comes in. He says, we keep forgetting that Braylon Trice is back next year too. No, we don't. And we hit on this earlier in the show, Mitch, that, the odds on hitting on a third round edge are low. Again, you can go back and you can go through and say, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? I know there's exceptions to the rule. The rule is it's hard to hit on a third round edge. The odds are against them in a big way. The odds of a third round edge coming off of an ACL injury being an impact player that year are almost zero. So if you are able to get something out of Braylon Trice next year, man, that's gravy. Awesome. Rooting for him. He can outplay his draft position, the injury, but dude, he's got 2 big strikes against him going into next year. I am not going into next year planning my defense around the impact of Braylon Trice. There's just no way. You absolutely cannot do that. If you get something out of him, awesome, but you can't expect it. There's just no way.
Yeah. It'd be a nice bonus.
It's a gravy. We're getting close to Thanksgiving, Nick. It's that'd be gravy. And God bless him. Work hard, come back, and show everybody you should have been a first round pick, and that the fact that you tore up your knee didn't matter.
Yeah,
those are tough, man. Those are tough. So
we'll see.
Mitch,
too?
Go ahead.
He's also going to be 24 years old, so he's older for a rookie at a position that typically the special guys come out pretty early, right? That's not a position like offensive line, quarterback, tight end, even some of the linebacker, whatever. Where it's like you're not as worried about taking the seniors compared to the juniors. Edge, cornerback, wide receiver.
Going back to, I don't want to trade a draft pick for Azeez Ojulari. He's about the same age as Braylon Trice. He's only a year older, so he would be a building block if you re-sign him for the right price, and 2, you wanted him to begin with. Again, I'm not positive on the evaluation there. I haven't watched him enough to go, oh yeah, man, this is a dude. He's just playing behind other guys, and when he's on it, he's phenomenal. When I see it's like a run and shoot quarterback, man. I'm not necessarily as worried about the stats because the Giants have like 40 sacks this year. So is everybody getting numbers because they're just blitzing the lights out, or is he whipping the guys in front of him? I didn't know the answer to that question before. I'm going, oh yeah, you should have gone for Azeez and thrown a third rounder in 2026 and sweeten the pot. So I understand that one. On that note, we are going to get out of here. I want to say thanks again to Lion Coffee for powering the Falcons podcast. I want to say thank you to our super chat superstars who came in, like Greg, like Rusty. Mitchell came in a pair of times. Rio came in a couple of times as well, and Richard Weaver. Thank you so much for the stars over on Facebook. Really means a lot. Helps keep our foreheads nice and shiny. My forehead nice and shiny, at least. And Monday, we'll be back. Hopefully, Falcons fans, you do not get any Saints voodoo. This is a team that is in turmoil. Step on their necks. Put them away. They're looking forward to the offseason. They've lost 7 in a row now since their 2-0 start, and everybody was crowning them NFC champions. 7 in a row, including a loss to the Panthers. They fired their coach. They're selling off Pro Bowl cornerbacks. These guys are done. Don't let them get up. But we'll be back on Monday with our Aftermath Gut Reaction show and hopefully another Falcons winning Monday for y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it'll be a big win.
So thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks again to Lion Coffee, our Super Chat superstars. Y'all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy a great football weekend. We'll see you next week.
Peace.